Thank you for staying with us. Today, we remember the life and times of Kudirat Abiola, the wife of late Nigerian Moshood Abiola, born in 1951 in Zaria. She got married at 21 and had 7 children while having a successful business. Her entry into the political space happened when she joined to campaign for the election of her husband into the presidency that was to usher in democracy in 1993. But the result was later annulled. She was known for her participation in pro-democracy protests against the military government alongside other activists such as Chief Anthony Enahoro. She fought for the release of her husband, during which she was killed by alleged gunmen in 1996. Joining us in our Abuja studio is President MKO Abiola Center for Youth and Sports Development Africa, Abdul Abiola. Good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
And also joining us via Zoom from the UK is social commentator and 2023 presidential candidate Boot Party, Sonny Adenuga. Good morning. Thank you for joining us. All right, let me come to you now, Abdul. Talking about your late mom, 28 years on, talk to us what your fondest memories of her are, especially when we're talking about her fight for democracy.
Wow. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. My fondest memories of my mom was her just basically, correcting me. Yeah, I can hear you. Hello?
Go ahead.
Okay, yeah, so some of the fondest memories of my mom, you have to understand that I was very young when she was assassinated. So most of the memories I have is me maybe doing something wrong and she's having to correct me over time. And then she always used to pull my ears. And, some of those things I miss, because, she was very hands-on, even though she was so busy, she was still always hands-on. So when I made a mistake, she was always there to correct me. So some of those, I think those were the things. And then just the person she was, she was a very nice, humble lady. And, I don't know, she was kind of, I don't know if it was strict, I would say, because, I used to, my dad had all these different cars in the house, and she used to always make us go to school with a 504. And I used to wonder why she always did that. And later on in life, I realized that she was trying to make me understand that no matter how much wealth you might have, you should always know that it's not really always about wealth. And then you should always look at other people who don't have as much as you do and be compassionate. So I think that was one of the things I miss, that more lessons that I could have learned from her that I wasn't able to.
Yes, but you must have read commentaries about her and what she did, her role in the fight for democracy, especially supporting your father at the time. What was the most striking about the things you read?
Okay.
Especially
that I can easily tell you. First of all, my mom was not only after the fact that my dad was arrested, she was also very active during the elections. She was in charge of the North. You said she was born in Zaria. She spoke Hausa fluently, and she was, she grew up basically in the North, so she understood their culture, and she was able to deliver my father's message to them in the North in a way that they could actually receive. So yeah, she was very instrumental through that whole campaign, and even after the annulment, and being one of the leaders of the pro-democracy movement, she really wanted to make it clear that justice had to be done. I don't think she really thought that that there was anything that happened even after the annulment that couldn't have been taken back, and she just wanted to make it clear that, look, what was taken wasn't just Abiola, but the people's hope. And I think she wants to, so I was very encouraged with that. And one thing that I remember vividly was the day the military came to my father's house in Towing Street to pick my father up. They had blocked the whole Towing Street with tankers, and my cousin was in the house. My cousin Jay Hassan was in the house. And his mom was so scared that she came to pick him up. She lived on the island, so she came to pick him up. My mom walked Jide through the soldiers. I was holding her hand, and all I could see were guns. And she walked my cousin all the way to the Crescent Gate in front of all these soldiers, you know. And you know, she wasn't scared. She was brave, and she understood that, look, you know, that they were just following orders. But she also said, look, she cannot have somebody else's child here when his mom is looking for him. Let me take this child to the gate. So she was very brave. She believed in Allah. The same way Allah gave me life is the same way He took her life. I don't think, I think she just knew that, look, what she does while she lived would live on after the fact. This is 28 years later, and we're still discussing the role she played. You know, I'm encouraged with that, and I hope this would inspire young women across Nigeria and even across the globe to, like, you know, speak their own truth and, you know, stand for what they believe in.
Right, let me come to President Abu Party and for social commentator. So, what role would you say that Kudirat Abiola played in ensuring in the struggle for democracy in Nigeria, and how do you think our efforts contributed to the eventual return to the civilian rule? Because one would not be able to run for presidential election, you know, when there was no democracy. So how do you think her role the role she played, you know, made this possible for people like you?
And first and foremost, we use the opportunity to say, may the soul of Elijah Kudirat Abiola continue to rest in eternal peace. And obviously, she can you hear me?
Carry on, we can.
Yeah, she was actually an hero. And in a country like ours, where the sense of hero are actually being diminished. But during that time, I think I was young. I was just in my very early 20s. And I remember very vividly well how difficult it was during the military era of General Abacha. But what late Kudirat Abiola did, she dared the military, you know. And if you look at it, indeed, she gave herself. She gave us also a glimpse of our own potential to aspire for greater things. And it's not just only the women folks. She inspired all of us. And like Riley said, how is it possible for us to have democracy today? Many people might have taken for granted the democracy we have today because maybe the economic situation. But we should not forget in hurry that there are a lot of people who died, including Elijah Kudirat Abiola, and they were just not fighting personal fights. They believed, like it was said earlier, you know, they believed in their mind that, look, they are fighting for Nigeria. And like Riley said again, how can we say, oh, you're going to have a presidential candidate or a governorship candidate, or even if you are a councillor? My message to the political class today is this. Please, let's look back and look at the effort, the people who paid the ultimate price for what we're enjoying today, the democracy, if not in the freedom that we have today. So there is absolutely no doubt, or anyone will go out there and undermine the effort these people have made to our political development. And I had my voice to those who have been saying, the likes of Elijah Kudirat Abiola, the likes of Kensa Oruwa, and those who died during our darkest moment of our political history should be immortalized. It needs to be immortalized so that young people can read about these people and not just hear about it in passing. I'm most likely sure many young people who are listening today will be like, oh, maybe they've never heard about Elijah Kudirat Abiola. They've never heard the role she played and all of so. So I would say definitely a lot needs to be done, and she actually made a very great impact in our political history.
Now, staying with you, Sonny, there are those who question if her death in the struggle for a return to democracy is actually worth it, or was worth it, because the very issues that brought about that struggle, according to them, are still very much with us.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I can share the sympathy of, the views of people who feel like, oh, today we're having strike, the leaders, the crops of leaders that we have today, they're not doing what we want them to do. Many are so disinterested in even the idea of even talking about political heroes. Because we are little or known, we largely don't know many of our heroes in the past. But the point, the area I want people to focus on is this. During this time in the life of these heroes, like I've forgotten his name. I think he's Kabir, who was talking. The son of the late Kudirat Abiola. They had family like ours. You're hearing from our son. And in addition to family life, to living the normal life all of us we live, they added this task to it. It's not just an easy task to be able to add on to your difficulties, your challenges of bringing up your own children, and to get to the point that you will not even mind to be killed for what you believe in. So I'm going to say yes, people may feel disinterested, but that should not make us to undermine the idea of you. And let's not deceive ourselves. Today we talk about social influencer and all the rest. Why are people looking up to these people? We can deceive. One can deceive him or ourselves to think that we don't need heroes in our life. We're social animals. We're human beings that always try to look up to some people at a different stage in our life. See, once you were born and you start getting to that age of knowledge, you want to look up to people, first and foremost from family.
I like the fact that you brought in the matter of age. Nigeria is celebrating 25 years of democracy this year, and that is why some are asking that question, that 25 years, why are we still having these teething problems, as they might describe it? We should have weaned ourselves off of these issues.
Yeah, political journey, it's political life of any nation is a journey. And I'm going to tell you, we have countries who have practiced democracy for decades, centuries, and yet they still have their own challenges. In America, you saw some years ago what happened in Washington with former President Trump. And nobody in their life will have thought at a point in their life they could get to that point. So it's not about measuring, even just about numbers of age, but it's actually fighting for the challenges that we face in every time of our life. Of course, 25 years is more than enough to have achieved. However, where we are as a people, what we need to do is to continue to make sure that we build a better time, a better future for the generation yet unborn. If we dwell on the timing, then or how many years it's been, it's actually we're going to be here forever and start talking about everything that is wrong. But personally, I'm a very, very incurable optimist in terms of believing in the Nigerian project, and I believe that we can borrow leave. And I tell you, I'm one of those people who, when I look back, I look at the deaths of the likes of Alhaji Kudirat Abiola, and I feel motivated. And that's what we need to do. We need many of our political leaders to stop being gravitated towards mediocrity. That's why we have problem we have today. We have created leaders who are only in survival mode, who are not interested in the people, who are so disinterested. That should not be the case. We should start cultivating leadership skills right from young age, so that the tomorrow that we expect to have is not just going to be based on chance. It should be about what we plan, what we desire for, and what we're actually going to achieve.
Absolutely. Abdul Abiola, let me come to you. So, most times, especially on a day like this, of course, there are several days you have to remember your mom. On a day like this, where we are having this conversation, how do you think, could you talk to us about how you felt she handled the risks and threats she faced, particularly from the military regime? And if you not look at all of that, how she, braved that experience vis-a-vis the current activists that we have, especially the female activists that we have. If you want to do some sort of maybe comparison for the want of word, how do you think you can situate what you saw then and what you see now?
Okay, so back in that period in 1993, you have to understand that, now I think we are way more free than we were before. There was a previous question that was asked to my colleague on this panel, and Egbo, I'm sorry to call you my colleague, but my Egbo on this panel, and he mentioned, and we're talking about democracy and where we are today. Like he said, democracy is not a destination, it's a journey. That's number one. Now, unlike before, you can actually query your government. Then you could you get a letter and it's a bomb. People died, people lost limbs based on on expressing their thoughts. You could even go eat at a restaurant and have a conversation with your friend, without knowing who the next person next to you could be. There was a lot of tension. Now there's still the same tension, but it's coming from different angles. Inflation, this issue with the labor union and all that. But for me, I think that democracy, like I said, is a journey. Another thing that is also implicit in democracy is the participation of the citizenry. Abiola, with all his wealth and his intentions, would never fix Nigeria himself. He will have taken the collective will of the majority of the people to do it. And I think he believed in that. So what we first of all have to do is also participate. I can only ask the cook about the food if I'm aware of what he's cooking. It is very simple. If we are not informed of the issues, we're not engaging our leaders, and we're not there at the point of call. So we need to massively engage ourselves, educate ourselves, participate in the process. That is the only way we can request for these dividends that we're all yearning for. It's important that democracy can only work if it's from both sides of the coin. The leadership can only be kept accountable from the followership. We need to, first of all, engage the system. And in so doing, we're informed, we're educating ourselves, and that would now help us get to that promised land. I really believe in that. I think, people always said, my father won in the north. His message was, he sent a message that resonated across Nigeria. That can also be done. I think messaging is key. Expressing leadership is not a master-servant relationship. No, it's more of a leadership position. You lead from the front. You explain your reasoning to your people. They can buy into that reasoning, and they will be the ones to do the heavy lifting. I can't do it myself, but we, as a unit, as a community, can do more. That is my approach to this democracy that we're facing. You don't like democracy? I understand that. Why don't we come together, discuss what we don't like about it, and then work towards bringing up a critical mass of people who share that same idea. That way, when I am in that office, it is not me doing the work at the grassroots. Everybody is in line. They all know what we're doing. The president said renewed hope. How many of the people in the cabinet are still part of this agenda? We need to start to build a culture of, of values. Parties need to stand for something. And I really believe that Nigeria, the best days are still ahead of us. I can't sit here. I'm very optimistic. Nigerian people are very hopeful, intelligent people. And once we start to see Nigeria as our collective responsibility, things will start to get better.
Abdul, let me confirm if you can hear me.
I can hear you.
Oh, fantastic. So I'm happy that you answered, you provide other clarifications to my colleague's earlier question, but you've not answered the question that I asked you. I'm concerned about, if you compare the activism that your mom was involved in. Of course, some will say largely it was because she's in love with Nigeria. Others will say no, because her husband was involved. But if you compare her activism back in the day to what we see today, our respect for the country, our love for the country, our respect for the emblem and symbols of Nigeria. Of course, we have some people who are saying that they will not even respect Nigeria's symbol, especially the reverted old national anthem. So how would you situate hers compared to what you see today in contemporary struggles, for human rights and democracy in Nigeria?
I agree. Okay, so let me give you see, we're talking about two different times. My mom, we're talking about almost 30 years ago. If you heard your stories of your father, he will tell you how he will go to London with 100 and something naira. It seems like they grew up in a different time entirely. So my father always said something, the problems that he will create during his lifetime will be solved by his children. We think differently. So our activism will also be geared differently. We have different ways of communicating with each other now that wasn't available back in the day. We use social media to communicate with ourselves. The youth are taking, we look at this NSAS of a thing. The way it came about it wasn't generic. It wasn't like the normal system. It wasn't leadership top. It was just more of people coming together with a common goal to solve a problem. So what I'm suggesting is, yes, the activism is different, but it doesn't mean it's any worse off. It's just a difference in timing and in vehicles available for one to use. Back in the day, you couldn't really do much but to maybe go on radio, go on the basic TV stations like this. But now, a person in his room can send a message that will go global and would galvanize a lot more people. So I'm suggesting to you that, yes, I believe that there's a difference in the kind of activism that we do see now, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's just adapting to the times. So I believe that we have so many of them now. We have activists. Even I remember, I think this lady who is in the Labour Party, she refused to stand up for the national anthem. That is a way of protesting. I suggest that maybe what she might want to do is maybe go take it through the courts, because that might be a better way to go by it. But no, instead of going against the law, I don't want to encourage anybody to go against the law. But I would just suggest that if you have any grievances or you have any objections to anything, you can bring this up, and you can bring up these situations, and there are ways you can express your displeasure with some of the policies or decisions that government makes. But my general point is, activism is not just a one size fits all. And I think that's what we're having in Nigeria today, where it's like everything is always strike. Sometimes it might not necessarily have to come to that, but then we need to have two parties who are willing to negotiate. So yeah, I do understand that things have changed, but I do tell you that sometimes it might not be necessarily for the worse. So my mom's activism back then was based on that period, that prism. Now we're in a different time. There are different ways to communicate and different ways to get your points across. You might not necessarily have to go to the levels that she had to do, and to get the necessary outreach that you want. You remember back in 1993, there was nothing like internet, or there was no Instagram or Twitter or anything like this.
Right. Now, because that question leads to the next question I want to ask you now, which has to do with, do you ever wish she wasn't involved in the struggle for your father's freedom at the time?
No, I can't say that. I can't say that. You have to understand that, like I said, she was a woman and she made her own decisions. And I bet you that it wasn't because she was my father's wife that she did what she did. My mother had as much agency in that mandate as my father did. Like I told you, she led the campaign in the north. She understood that the same way my father made promises in the southwest and other parts of the country, she was the one who making those promises in the north. She would have been held accountable. She understood that. And she also believed in the vision my father had for the Nigerian people. So that was enough as a Nigerian herself to key into it. And many other Nigerians, not only my mother, keyed into that same vision. The glory to God that the president today was a key member of that struggle. He knows what they stood for and what they died for. So as far as I'm concerned, I can't sit here as a Nigerian man who has children and say I would like my mother to not have done what she did, because she did it for me and many other children yet unborn. We need to start to address the issues honestly. Once we start to do that, things will start to work. Since we start will start to take shape. So yes, I'm proud of her. I always say one thing. My mom, when she passed away, I think I was about 9-10 years old. That was 9-10 years that I had with my mom, and I thank Allah for that, because like I said, Allah gives and Allah takes. I had 9 years with my mother. Some people never knew their parents to begin with. So, for me to sit here and say, oh, I just, it shows that I myself am not in touch with the realities. And life, the only thing that we're guaranteed when we're born is the day that there's going to be a day that we're going to leave this earth. What do we do while we're here matters. This is 28 years later. We're talking about the sacrifice she made and the things she decided to do when she did this 28 years ago. This shows that you can actually live after your time, based on the deeds you do while you're alive.
Yeah. Sonny Adenuga, let me come to you. The trial involving the death of the murder of Kudirat Abiola resulted in conviction of several defendants, including Hamza Al-Mustafa, a former presidential chief security officer, and then it was later discharged. It was released on appeal, and all of that. So these people have been asking, because accusation finger had been, moving up and down ever since, even up to now. People still talk about it. What progress do you think has been made in seeking justice for Kudirat's murder, and what remaining challenges do you think need to be addressed?
Yeah, clearly that was it's a big dent in terms of the national history of our country, that any Nigerian, it doesn't have to be high-profile person, can be killed, and clearly the known culprits were not in the face of many people, myself included, were brought to justice. That said, more needs to be done. But we also need to understand that the time we were in then, it was a military era, and the way the military worked is a chain of order, is a command of orders. So if you have a boss and he tells you to do something, you're just going to go and do it. And that has been one of the biggest defense the accused were used in the court of law. But that, quote and unquote, maybe for many of us, it will always be a mystery. Why? Because I'm not a military person myself, but that will always be a mystery. But I will want to focus more on what I think the government of the day should be doing for the likes of our heroes, not because of themselves, but we need to promote them, because they are already gone. But we need to promote them. We need to put them on the pedestal so that future generations can look up to them and see that, look, these people who gave their life, is like anything can bring you into politics. It doesn't matter that is your husband or your brother. Something can bring you to the desire to serve your people. And that was what Alhaja Kudirat Abiola did. And at the end, she paid the ultimate price. And that is key. And that part, remember, heroes are human beings like us. We all have our differences. We're going to have our personal life. But they transcend, into, in Yoruba, they become an Orisha. They become a saint. And today we're talking about her because of what she did. And the living legacy needs to be told in such a way that it could be a glimpse of hope for future generations. They could see we will be able to see part of us in her. And that's the key part I want to really dwell on, because at the end of the day, the judiciary system, the legal system, they're going to do their own bit. But the political class also need to do their own bit. And also talking about the type of leadership we're having in our country today is very key. The political class, we need to look at ourselves. People need to look themselves and say, look, do we want to continue on this path? Or do we really want to serve our people? That is important. It's a systemic thing, and it's for all of us to do, not just one individual in one office, but everyone who is serving in public office should be able to say, look, I want to serve Nigeria. And that's what these people died for.
All right, let me come to you now, Abdul. One quick and final question. Do you think your mom has been immortalized appropriately as she should?
Wow. Like I said, every year we remember her. I immortalize her. I think, when we talk about immortalizing somebody, this is like the medicine after somebody has been prescribed dead. That for me, I just say people should pray for my mother. May Allah bless her soul. And make it easy for her. Because as far as I'm concerned, the only way we can immortalize any of these people who sacrificed their lives, because my mother, we're talking about my mother now, but there were many people who died during this period that we're talking about. I know so many of them that they lost their lives due to this struggle. So I'm suggesting that if things are put in place and Nigeria works, that might be the best way to immortalize my mother. Where that slogan my father was coined, the farewell to poverty, is actually something that we realize. That's another way. So it might not necessarily be by creating a statue or naming a building after somebody, but it could also be just, implementing some of those ideas that they might have had. That might be a way to immortalize some of our fallen heroes. Alhamdulillah, for me, between me and a friend of mine, Joshua Ojo, who's a U.S. Film director, we have created a movie dedicated to my mom and the role she played. It's going to be out soon, and we're actually even doing a private viewing today on her anniversary in Lagos. So it's one of those things that we're also looking at ways we can let people know who she was and what she stood for, and that's a way of immortalizing her. So, and I'm sure my sister Hafsat is doing something in her own way to immortalize her. So I think what we need to do, if we're talking about from the government perspective, is first of all, those who are accused of, taking her life prematurely, be brought to book. That might be a way of, acknowledging her sacrifice, because, she was taken and she was 44 years old. She was still young. She had a lot to live for and a lot to give. And, she was abruptly, her life was cut short. Although, like I said, I'm a Muslim, and like I said, Allah gives and Allah takes. When we do know that something was done in such a violent manner, just so that this doesn't happen again, we need to make sure that the law takes its course.
Absolutely, and that's a fine place to leave the conversation. We must thank you, President, MKO Abiola Center for Youth and Sports Development Africa, Abdul Abiola, as well as presidential candidate, Both Party social commentator, Sonny Adenuga, for your time on the program. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Right.
Yeah.
Still ahead on TVC Breakfast. Today is the